Khan, if the creature who destroyed the orb should make its way here...
It shall not come to that, my lord. I swear it.
We shall see, Khan. If you fail me in this, I shall attend to the matter personally.
The city is in peril, thieves run the streets, a dark plot brews below, and it's up to us to save Baldur's Gate. Despite how classically dark and cinematic this clip may look, Dark Alliance falls short of being the RPG its predecessors were, in favor of being an even lesser Diablo clone. It has a genuinely good story structure that it completely abandons halfway through, ultimately devolving into an unholy union of mechanical jank, terrible narrative structure, and jiggle physics. Hello, I'm Brandy with the Y, and welcome to Worst RPG Ever, this series where I play a bunch of RPGs and give my retrospective on the good, the bad, and the ugly of that game's design, and there is a lot of ugly to be found. So let's travel to the Forgotten Realms, take on an unholy alliance of thieves, dark elves, and even a dragon to become the savior of Baldur's Gate in order to answer one burning question: Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, is it the worst RPG ever? Baldur's Gate is a big name, more so in recent times due to the work of Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate 3, which epitomized the principle of respecting player choice by reacting to almost every decision they could possibly make. BioWare, the studio in charge of creating the original games, will continue to implement these aspects later in Neverwinter Nights, not to be confused with the earlier Neverwinter Nights traditional RPG, not to be confused with the Brimstone Angel series written by Aaron M. Evans, which is incorrectly listed as Neverwinter Nights on Amazon. Even though these games are separated by 20 years of technological advancement, the core principle remains the same: respect for player agency. Dark Alliance was produced by Studio Snowblind and released only a year after Baldur's Gate 2. It completely deviates from the path of an open-world RPG in an effort to forge its own identity as a linear dungeon-crawling action game. It takes the top-down isometric viewpoint, but the vistas are much more limited. It has the familiar D&D classes, but they've been molded to fit into the generic archetypes of swordman, bowman, and magic lady. Outside of the main hubs, the towns are populated by NPCs that can't be spoken to or interacted with in any way, effectively reducing them to mannequins. The characters you can interact with only have a single dialogue path. It's not quite Baldur's Gate and not quite D&D, and not at all a player-driven narrative. It's pretty much Diablo minus the roguelike elements and unique class structure. So what was the point of this game? What was the guiding principle behind the studio's choice to create a game tied to the Baldur's Gate IP? If we follow the trail, it doesn't seem to paint the brightest picture. The sequel, Dark Alliance 2, would go on to be developed and produced 3 years later by Blackout Studios, while Snowblind would go on to create Champions of Norath, another action RPG based on a small game you may have heard of called EverQuest, in 2005, along with a series of other titles based on high-profile IPs until their ultimate acquisition in 2009 by Warner Brothers. The CEO, Ryan Geithman, along with his lead technical designer responsible for developing their game engine, would then go on to found Embers Entertainment and develop mobile games. Attempting to reach the Ember Entertainment website results in an error 404, and digging deeper reveals that they are no longer active as of 2024. So, Snowblind is tied to a bunch of really well-known IPs, and after their first commercial failure, went defunct and started making mobile games. Right, I don't think it's crazy to say that they might have mostly been in it for the money, only to realize that extracting money from an art form is actually rather difficult. On an objective note, Dark Alliance did review relatively well, and let this be a lesson to us all to never let a game review color over your subjective experience. I'll be playing the game for the first time and doing my best to compare it to its contemporaries and seeing if any of the systems or aspects still hold up today. Dark Alliance released on multiple platforms, including PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and Game Boy Advance, before eventually being re-released on PC. I'll be playing the GameCube version, and the default controls aren't my favorite. Luckily, you can remap them however you want from the main menu. You can choose to do the tutorial, which is totally separate from the main game. Now, I was an avid reader of game manuals back when I was a child, so I have an appreciation for a well-built tutorial to introduce the core systems. This is not that tutorial. We learn to interact with objects and items dropped in the ground. Picking up weapons doesn't equip them. You select them in the equipment menu. Jump over these boxes and get a pop-up telling us to press A to attack, but my remapped attack button is actually B, so the input text isn't dynamic. Time to kill some standard rookie monsters, the classic New York rap. Now behold, combat. Spamming the melee attack button actually makes you swing faster in what is technically a 3-hit combo, but there's no break in speed between combos. There are multiple melee weapon types, but there is no functional difference between any of them. These pedestals act as save points, which is pretty typical for games of this era, and explode in a flourish of particles after being used. Ranged combat works similar to melee. Equip your bow and you can freely switch with your melee setup at any time. Then it has us shoot arrows, not at enemies, enemies or a target, just empty space. You can also equip the arrows, but this doesn't matter because there is only one ammo type and the bow will still shoot them. It also mentions abilities, but doesn't let you try any of them. That's it, end of tutorial. It honestly feels like they made the game and went, oh yeah, we should probably make a tutorial. It feels rushed, misses abilities, which is arguably the most important mechanic, and doesn't account for any adjusted button inputs. It probably would have been better to have the melee and ranged combat segments together rather than randomly separated by the save point instructions, and the range tutorial is literally shooting at nothing. It would have been better to have an unreachable target for us to practice aiming. If you're ready to start, pick one of the three characters: the arcane archer, the dwarven warrior, and the scantily clad elven sorceress. And now a secret: if you hold the left and right buttons while choosing your character, you can actually play as a secret character, Dristo Erden, a hero from the Forgotten Realms novels, and a quest character from the early Baldur's Gate games. Each character has different abilities associated with their class. Those abilities use energy indicated on the meter next to your health and experience bar. You gain abilities by leveling up and allocating the points you gain. The amount of points you gain increases every level, and many skills require you to level up multiple times in order to upgrade, which feels terrible because you will never be able to experience every ability available to your class. If you want any of your individual abilities to be useful, you'll need to dump a stupid amount of points into upgrading them, which is objectively worse than just investing into a newer, more powerful skill 90% of the time. What follows is that early skills become completely ignored, and the points used on them ultimately feel like a complete waste by the endgame when they become useless. After leveling up 4 times, you can increase one of your 6 attributes, and the attribute system is one of the worst reworks I have ever seen of the original D&D system. Any character can take advantage of any stat, but the descriptions make attribute investment not only more confusing, but less useful overall. Strength increases melee damage and chance to hit. Enemies have hitboxes and attacks have points where they will and won't register, but missing melee attacks is fairly rare, to the point where I'm not sure if I ever missed because I wasn't standing in the right spot or because I just missed the roll. Dexterity increases bow damage. Intelligence says it increases your energy, but it actually increases your energy and energy regeneration rate, making it more useful than it lets on. And the only way you would know this is if you read the instruction manual included with the game. Constitution increases health and health regen respectively. Charisma affects the price of shops, and wisdom increases the amount of XP gained from enemies, making it mostly worthless. Nothing in the game will tell you that you only gain the benefit of those levels on even numbers, meaning that if you want to heavily invest into an attribute, you have to level it up twice. So the maximum benefit to any one stat from this would be about 2 times per playthrough. This means that the attribute system is generally insignificant compared to every other way you can improve your stats via skills and gear. It really doesn't matter. Starting stats depends on your character of choice, but your armor and weapons play a much bigger part of combat. Any character can use any armor or weapon with the exception of warhammers and bastard swords, which are exclusive to the dwarven warrior, and every item not bought in shops are received through random drops. And in the classic case of a feels bad mechanic, there is an inventory weight limit dependent upon your strength level that's reduced by the armor you are wearing. So whenever you upgrade to better, heavier armor, you won't be able to gather all of your drops to sell back to the shop, thereby breaking the pacing of the kill, loot, sell gameplay loop, on top of curtailing my neurotic loot goblin tendencies. Weapon damage is represented by a range, with some weapons having special effects like the disruption weapons, which can insta-kill undead enemies on critical hits. But the design is jank. The damage numbers for weapons with elemental modifiers, represented by this symbol beneath the name, are calculated incorrectly, and there is nothing in the game or manual that explains what any of the weapon descriptors actually mean. Whenever you buy weapons and armor, there is no immediate way to compare what you are wearing to what you are buying. You just have to keep track or close the shop, open your inventory, and check again, which is a pretty careless design given that JRPGs have nailed this since at least 6 years prior. The core of my issue with the system is that unique gameplay is what gives the characters their own identity. If players want to wield a big weapon, they must be the warrior. If you want to use spells, you must be the sorceress. But given that the sorceress is capable of effectively using melee bows and having her own unique kit of spells, it's easily the best class. Later on, I'll even get a spell that trivializes almost every encounter, but the only thing that really feels unique about each of the classes are the abilities. Alright, enough preamble. Let's get this playthrough on the road. I choose the character with boobs and Act 1 starts. We've arrived in Baldur's Gate when suddenly 2 muggers sneak up behind us and knock us out, stealing all of our money.
Easy pickings, hey, Karn?
Indeed. Let's see what our little ambush has won us.
Halt! Who goes there?
It's the watch.
Let's get out of here!
Yes, but take the gold. Leave the rest for the watch.
Luckily, the guards arrive before they can cut our throats and direct us to the Elf Song Tavern. Yes, the one and only Elf Song Tavern, present in every mainline game. Elliot, the bartender, has an exclamation mark above her head, which definitely means we're supposed to speak with her, and they've taken extra care with a limited polygon count to make sure she jiggles with every animation. Apparently there's a war between thief guilds, and she suggests we look in the sewers accessible from her basement. If we take care of her rat problem, she'll give us the key to pass through, and we'll all accept that the elf song rat problem will never disappear. Talk to Ethan, and he's a nice guy, so he hands us a dagger and tells us to get stabby. If you talk to everyone else at the bar, you'll find a shop and this guy who offers us a side quest to nab some wine in the cellar. Every side quest is a fetch quest, and for some reason they only exist in Act 1. Side note, you can't pull out your weapons inside the main city, where there aren't any combatants, which adds to the roleplay feel. However, running without your weapons uses the same animation as running with them in your hands. This gives us a chance to play with some abilities. Everyone uses the same universal energy system, and it drains as you use them. The sorceress's first spell is Burning Hands, a powerful flamethrower that is super useful because I can just spray it instead of aiming carefully. Then I noticed something odd. My spells can't hit the smaller rats, but the dagger can, creating a very satisfying, if incongruent, punching sound. This will matter later when I cheese a bunch of enemies. On that note, blocking was strangely never covered in the tutorial. You can block as long as you have a shield or weapon, but a weapon can only hold the block action for a short time, while if you're holding a shield, you can block indefinitely. Blocking will prevent damage in the direction you point, but not all attacks can be blocked. After the rats are taken care of, we can chug a potion of recall to return to the tavern. This is the core gameplay loop. Do the missions, loot the enemies, keep what you need, sell what you don't, rinse and repeat. It is literally Diablo. But unlike Diablo, what you can get in a shop is generally superior and money is limited because enemies don't respawn. Talk to Aelith, but she tells us that Ethan followed us to help, so we head down to the sewers to find him and we get a cutscene.
What's this you've caught? A sewer rat? Don't hurt him. Lord Xantum will wish to speak to him. It'll need to be in the best of health. Ah, excellent. I was expecting you. Did you receive the package from Lord Xantum?
I did. And I have it with me.
And you know where it is bound?
He told me to take it to the crypts and place it within the Chamber of Ashes there.
Now that I've had time to listen, I recognize that voice. It's Michael Bell. This man is everywhere, from animation to video game. He's Medivh from the Warcraft universe, Muramasa from Ninja Gaiden, and Raziel from the Legacy of Kain series. Ethan's been captured and the sewers are infested with kobolds and jellies. 99% of the game is traversing dungeons, and the art direction is pretty nice. Lighting effects are well done, the tiles and water channels genuinely look good, but it is inexplicably quiet.
My power's too weak.
This is something that persists throughout the game. The music will play at the beginning of a level once, and then proceed to never loop, leaving you with nothing but ambient sounds. Silence is an audio tool just like music, but it should serve to improve the ambiance. The silence here just feels like empty space. One of the funnier things that comes out of this is that my character's voice during a jump stands out that much more. Jumping is faster than walking, so this is the most efficient way to traverse every area in the game. To make things even better, the base elven armor adds an armor of 0 but has weight, meaning that bikini underwear is in fact the current meta. Behold, the defensive power of jiggle physics. The sewers are pretty simple. Go around and find multiple levers that open up the doors to allow us to go deeper. There's a pair of levers behind this blockade of spear throwers and a bunch of boxes, and I love how the game lets us use the environmental objects as barriers to help us get closer and melee them without getting hit. You can also hop over these barriers to proceed to the next area, which is a great use of vertical space, but this leads to a problem I mentioned earlier. Verticality also applies to hitboxes, but while spells can only ever hit on the same plane of height, melee attacks can actually hit below the player. Meaning, by standing on the second tier of boxes, this bugbear can't hit me with melee, but I can hit him. And now that I know this, I will absolutely abuse this cheese wherever possible. But that's not the only cheese. You see, I have spent a lot of time in Dark Souls, so I know that circle strafing has always been the most overpowered strategy in gaming, and Dark Alliance is no exception. You can circle around most enemies and beat them to death without ever allowing them to get a single hit in, and yes, it does work on bosses. Time to take on the Bugbear Chieftain. It's going to take daring tactics, bravery, and skill. Just kidding. Chug potions until his minions are all dead and then circle strafe him to death. flawless. Free Ethon, and he explains that he used a shortcut above ground to follow us, so the whole bit where we needed a key is now defunct. That's fine though, this happens throughout all of Act 1 whenever we make progress in order to cut down on time retreading old ground. He then gives us a key and tells us to take on the new Thief Guild, but why? I'm here to get my money back and maybe some petty revenge on the folks who wronged me, but not step into local political disputes. Unfortunately, this is the first instance of swaying the direction of the plot in a nonsensical direction, but more on that later. The city above is very nicely designed, at least aesthetically. There are people roaming around and a nice fountain, but there are no NPCs you can speak to and the camera here is fixed. You see that icon of the crossed out eye next to the HUD? It took me a while to figure this out, but that means you can't adjust your point of view. This happens both in and outside of dungeons. Normally I would think this was implemented for the sake of saving processing power, but the game was originally released on PlayStation 2, the same console that gave us Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy X, and Grand Theft Auto 3, two of which were released the same year. This is purely my speculation, but what I really think happened here is that this saved development time, given they were able to create it within 2 to 3 years and release a sequel 3 years later. I assume there are unfinished structures and textures that simply can't be viewed by the player, and they figured this was easier than wasting time on assets that don't significantly impact the game. Back to the plot. If you head back to the Elf Song Tavern and speak to Aelith, she'll reward you, but I can't help but notice her line is the exact same as the one she used when we first cleared out the rats. Down deeper into the sewers, more kobolds and more bugbears, but they are helpless before the overwhelming powers of the high ground and circle strafing. However, I discovered that the power of high ground doesn't mix well with the power of spamming the attack, because doing so causes me to move forward with the swing ever so slightly until eventually I fall down. Keep going and find this exploding chest. Okay, so chests are no longer always safe to open. This makes sense because the chests were presumably set here by the thieves, therefore they have booby traps to ward off other thieves. That's a neat bit of design. And to make things even better, I found a new cheese. The giant jellies tend to get stuck on corners. If they get stuck in the right spot, their ranged attack just hits a wall, but you can just shoot them with your bow. At this point I'm getting low on potions, so I'm stuck waiting around for my health to replenish before diving into another fight. If you don't do anything for a while, your character will say some idle lines.
What are we waiting for?
You know, now that I hear that voice, I believe I recognize it. Yep, it's Cree Summer. Her voice is absolutely iconic, and I still remember her as the charismatic voice of both Number 5, Abigail Lincoln, and her sister Cree in Codename Kids Next Door. New cutscene. Carney addresses the leader of the thieves, Xantum, who is voiced by yet another icon of the industry.
Have you done as I asked, Khan?
Yes, my lord Xantum. I sent one of my best men to the crypts in the temple, as you instructed.
Send your men into the sewers. Find out what has happened to our soldiers and bring me the prisoner. Do not fail me in this, Khan.
Yes, my lord. Should I recall the man I sent to the temple?
No. If he places the orb as instructed, he will not be coming back.
Tony J, probably best known for his role as the voice of the Elder God in the Legacy of Kain series. His voice has a level of depth and reverberation matched only by the biggest baritones of the voice acting world. He commands Karn to bring back Ethon, but he doesn't know we've already saved him, which sets us on a collision course. Continue down into the crypt, which is full of zombies and skellies. We then meet Fayed, a priest of El Mater. He tells us about the orb mentioned by Karn earlier. It somehow drew the priests to it before killing them and raising them as undead that now fill the halls. He managed to seal the crypts, but tells us how to undo it so we can head down below and destroy the orb before the undead make it into the city. He also functions as a free Pokemon Center. So we fight our way through the crypts, skeletons and tombs lining the halls, as well as these ghosts which don't do anything but add some ambiance. That's pretty cool. Annoyingly, there are these weird missing pixels I can find in random areas and corners. I'm spitballing again, but this is likely an artifact from the intersection of pre-generated segments within the game's engine that don't exactly line up, therefore leaving a small gap that they couldn't be bothered to fix within the schedule. This area also demonstrates just how complex combat encounters can get. You see, the skeletons only take half damage from arrows and slashing attacks, but if I switch to a blunt weapon like this Morning Star, I deal full damage. You can also knock the arms and legs off of zombies. A zombie with no arms can't attack you, so if you manage this, you can prioritize the other enemies first, which is a really cool way of mixing up how we manage our encounters. I also discover a reverse cheese. Zombies and skellies can hit me on this coffin, but because of this wall, I can't hit them and die. Find the urns, place them like Fayed told us, and continue down below. This room full of skeletons doesn't play fair. I can circle strafe them, but they can surround and maul me to death. Right, time for some tactics. Funnel them into this room as slowly as possible and pick them off one by one. Turn in another fetch quest, which awards me with the Mace of Disruption, which has a powerful special ability to potentially one-shot any undead enemy. And then I immediately find the far superior Morning Star of Disruption. Part of the problem with totally random loot is that the pacing of loot distribution is awful. There are many times when you might turn in 20 weapons to save up for a big upgrade purchase, which you immediately replace once a better item drops. This becomes even worse towards the end. In the lower crypts, the undead enemies now pop up out of the ground. It might have been cooler for enemies in a crypt to come out of any of the many empty coffins, but no, they pop out of the ground next to the coffins every time. I do, however, like how the footprint trail here is meant to lead me in the right direction, even if it winds up not really mattering, because I want to kill everything in the room for the XP and loot. In the main game, we find the orb, and it's got a new gimmick. After the start of the fight, it will float up and summon skeletons, which are actually tougher than the enemies we fight throughout the dungeon. You can't hit the orb when it's in the air, so after killing all of the minions, it will come down and give you a few moments to damage it. Now, I did try and cheese this fight because it turns out that if you fire arrows at it from a distance, the fight just won't start. But this doesn't work, even if it makes the normal damage confirmation sound. The moment the fight actually begins, it reveals that no damage was done. Also, if you try to shoot it with arrows after the fight starts, that won't work because it floats just above ground level, so they go through it. After we finally destroy the orb, Fayed thanks us and tells us to wait for him at the Elf Song Tavern. When we get there, we're met with Jarek, who says we're a hero and should join the Harpers. And then the game does something I'm really not a fan of. You see, the game presents us with the choice of whether or not to join the Harpers, an unofficial militia stationed in Baldur's Gate. Remember how in the beginning I said that Snowblind was moving away from its original RPG roots? If you tell him, we prefer to operate alone, you can't move forward with the story. You have to join the Harpers. Even more annoyingly, joining the Harpers is effectively a worthless development because they never help us after the first act. He then tasks us with infiltrating the new guild, and for some reason, we give him a key, which is supposedly looted from the corpse in the temple. But the game never told us about the key. Now, the key has an enchantment, but it's broken. Thankfully, Jarek instantly solves this problem for us so we can continue to the next level. I also finally figured out that I can toggle the minimap feature, which would be far more useful if it had a compass, because the secret entrance to the Thieves Guild is in the northeast corner of the sewer. Which direction is northeast? Well, up on the surface, the camera has us facing in a fixed direction, and if we go back down into the sewers, our orientation will stay the same. But the map is slanted, so this isn't really a hint. Your guess is as good as mine, but once you do find it, there's a new cutscene between Karn and Xantum.
What happened in the temple? Why do the priests still live?
I do not know, my lord Xantum. I have heard rumors that the orb was destroyed before it could do more than slay a few priests. I think my thieves and I may have met the attacker on the city streets above.
Your oversight has cost us much, Khan. Gather the soldiers. Although our secret entrances still remain undetected, it's only a matter of time before the dogs of the City Watch sniff us out. Khan, if the creature who destroyed the orb should make its way here...
It shall not come to that, my lord. I swear it.
We shall see, Khan. If you fail me in this, I shall attend to the matter personally.
Xantum is revealed to be a bigger version of the beholder Ethon found and killed in the sewers. What a nice little bit of foreshadowing that was. I hope you appreciate this as much as I did, because that's the last time this plot has anything resembling a coherent structure. The thieves in the secret base deal a lot of damage, so I upgrade myself to the scale mail to give myself a defensive boost, and the jiggle physics still work. Hell yeah, early 2000s priorities, baby. And then I find a new enemy type. These uncolored baby eldritch horrors that explode if you get near them. They die quickly, so slap them and run off before they can get close, or just shoot them with your bow. And now a new mechanic. Active pillar traps that will shoot fireballs at you whenever you run by them. Time it carefully because it will deal damage in an AoE. Then a platforming bit where these floating platforms will fall after a short time of walking on them. And at this point, I've noticed the flow of the game has changed from constant enemies surrounding and overwhelming me to precise platforming and puzzling, which feels abrupt after so many hours of just pure combat. The same platform puzzle appears again, but this time you have to wait for them to flash and reveal which ones will be erased. Otherwise, you'll wind up jumping to your death. Although with good enough aim, you can skip this by jumping 2 platforms at a time. Back to combat, and the game decides it's a good time to introduce poison, because it's an early 2000s era game, so of course it needs a terrible poison mechanic. Poison lasts for a hell of a long time and can stagger you just like in Baldur's Gate. That said, 8 legs are no match for the power of circles, and after making it through a lot more spiders and traps, Karn is waiting for us. Finally, after all this time, we can get our revenge against the very man who started it all. Our battle will be legendary. Secret base level 3 and a new trap, these interesting eyeball devices. Hey, I wonder what happens if... Okay, avoid the gaze of death, dodge the new arrow traps which function much like the fireball traps, and now for the first time the game is combining mechanics. Look, make your way over to the lever by jumping over these boxes to make use of the vertical space and avoid the gaze of the eyeballs. Then, pull the lever to disarm the traps. That's pretty good. And then this room, which is horrifying. You've got to pull all 10 levers to shut off this eyeball. This was very intimidating, but made me laugh out loud because the concept of installing this as a trap makes absolutely zero sense. Tell me, how many minions were sacrificed just to turn this passageway on and off? Finally reach the bottom and we face Xantum. Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary. That's it. That's literally it. At the start of the fight, I saw the spells and maneuvered a bit, but the moment I realized I could just stand in front and avoid all of it, I did. Jarek walks in and says that this is all a part of a bigger plot, and this conveniently located map connected by a triangle proves it. We, as Harpers, need to go through this major gate to stop whatever is going on. That's the end of Act 1, and if the game had ended right there, it would have been a somewhat average experience, but they decided instead to keep going for 2 more acts. So let's talk about Act 1. The introduction to the story is all right. We're introduced to Carne, get our motivation, meet the main cast, and get sent on our journey. Everything after this flows decently well, and we help people along the way as we work to help ourselves. No problems there, up until the point where we get appointed to being a Harper, which has no bearing on why we came here or anything we're doing. And now we're getting introduced to a secondary plot, which has the thinnest possible connection to everything we've been involved in. There was no foreshadowing, no warning, and it abandons everything we have established as important. Back at the tavern, if you talk with the shopkeeper, he'll have some choice words for us.
I heard of your battle in the Thieves Guild, friend. You may have saved all of Baldur's Gate from that beholder. Please, my shop is yours.
He actually reacts to us reaching the end of the act. So far, he has been the most RPG-like experience of the game. Head through the major gate and begin Act 2, and in what may be one of the most nonsensical design choices, the major gate is a one-way trip to the next area. Once you step through, you cannot go back or continue any of the side quests you started in Act 1. Do they bother to give you any warning to this prior to selecting the portal? No, but don't worry, because all of the gear you've unlocked will be immediately power crept upon arrival to the next town. The gate opens up to a desert full of gnolls and yetis, which confirms that I've finally entered the furry part of the game, and then these trolls show up and ruin the theme. Gnolls are much faster than all of the enemies so far, but they still can't beat circles and have a really bad tendency to just run past you. Once again though, credit where it's due, the fog effect on the side of the mountain is really nice and gives that feeling of being super high up without actually rendering anything below. The enemies are all much tougher, the save points are much further apart, and I die plenty of times until I finally make it to the dwarven village. Meet Torgir, who tells us that Dark Elves have invaded the mines and attacked them, so a group has gone to the mountain to light the signal beacon and alert the nearby towns. If we find them, he'll give us the key to enter the mines and kill the drow, so off we go. Here is where I made a big mistake. I mentioned earlier that the damage of elemental weapons is calculated differently, but there's no way for a player to know that without trying it out. I sell as much as I can in order to buy the Ice Burst Mithril Dagger, but there are 2 issues. 1, it isn't doing nearly as much damage as advertised because the calculation is wrong like I mentioned before, and 2, most of the enemies are resistant to ice damage. There was no way I could have guessed this in advance because I literally just went from a desert mountaintop to a forest into an icy mountain. That is a lot of nature swaps over a very short period of time. Another thing that I immediately start to notice is that the game is now making absolutely zero use of the vertical space. In Act 1 we had boxes, coffins, and even traps. Act 2 just has enemies, which means a lot more potion chugging and backtracking via the recall potion. To make things worse, the verticality that does exist does so in the form of really bad jank. Remember how spells and arrows are very height sensitive? By adding these slopes, they make it so that unless the enemy is on the same level as you, most will go through them dealing no damage. There are no more shortcuts we can unlock at every major junction, so it's a lot of walking back and forth, gathering drops, selling items, and killing enemies, which winds up murdering the pacing of the main loop. Atop the mountain, the path splits into 3 directions. In the ice cave to the west, this dead dwarf has the rest of the flint needed to spark the signal fire. Find the torch off the dwarf in the east, then find Colgrim hiding out in the cave, and this is a voice everyone should recognize.
I clang it into an axis. I've still enough strength to cut you.
Kevin Michael Richardson has voiced far too many cartoon roles to count, but I think my personal favorite is Captain Gantu from Lilo and Stitch. If this feels like a massive waste of talent to use on such an unimportant character, don't worry. They will do it again in Act 3. His crew is attacked by an ice dragon that froze the member holding the key, and we need to gather some special ingredients to light the fire for the watchtower and melt the ice. Which is dumb because if you go to the frozen dwarves and cast burning hands on them or the tower, it doesn't work. These aren't special magical ingredients, it's fuel and tinder you would use on any ordinary fire. After giving us a bit of exposition, he dies. Rip Colgrim. I also missed this important point that the game isn't very clear about and never bothers to do a second time. Before he dies, he tells us to take the oil flask, but he doesn't give it to you. You're supposed to pick it up next to him after he dies, which is the opposite of what we had to do with the magic key in Act 1. Walk past these balls of light and die. New plan, kill the balls of light, then walk by and light the brazier to melt the dwarves' bodies and take the key. The ice dragon sees us lighting the flame in the distance, and I guess that offends him, so he flies away. Take the key to Torgir and automatically decide to risk myself, even though he tells me I don't need to because apparently I'm really heroic and heroes yearn for the mines. The mines might be the best designed levels from a combat perspective. Some enemies use range, so we can use the corners to block them and lure in melee fighters. The exploding barrels help us to take out enemies that group up and is uniquely satisfying because the enemies explode into chunks, which is a lovely callback to a mechanic from the original games. Too bad this will never happen anywhere else. Level 2 has scantily clad dark elf mages with jiggle physics, and their magic is friendly fire enabled, which is great because they will kill their friends. I have no idea if that was intentional because they're drow, and that is an incredibly drow thing to do, but I'll give them the win for this anyway. By the way, watch out for the pits, although sometimes if you fall in, you won't die immediately. Level 3 introduces these massive juggernaut-like insects, and they're tough to get around to do the circle strat, so shield up and trade off hits as best you can. Finally, we meet Ilvara, leader of the drow in the tunnel, and she is, of course, racist.
An elf, a Darthier. You dare attack us? You and the rest of your sun-cursed race of traitors will die for crossing us.
Her eyebrows also do this weird constant shifting thing. Note a bit of foreshadowing here.
My attack? You presume much. The dwarven mines were to be ours, but we care nothing for the Sunset Mountains or your filthy surface cities. Those have been promised to others.
Time to fight, and wait, where does she just go? Turns out, this is a well-known bug whereupon teleporting, she will fall through the map and become unreachable. So I start over, and aha, there we go. She teleports and fires spells in addition to having a magical shield that reduces the damage she takes from your magic, as well as a shield of knives that hurt you if you get too close. Hide behind obstacles and dodge the fireballs, and this is a fantastic fight. After she dies, find and free Brogan, a Harper agent who exposition dumps because that is the only role of every NPC of the game at this point. The drow were here to make a path for the trolls and gnolls to the mountains through the dwarven settlement. We need to go to the Marsh of Chalimber, through the next major gate in the ice cave to fight the true threat. So off we go. Head inside and immediately get ambushed by a displacer beast. Nasty creatures that teleport and can make themselves invisible. Then a giant that has a screen shaking effect so you really feel his weight and heft, and that is nice. Not so fun fact, you can't block enemies this big with your shield, so stick to either spell spam or circle strafing. At the gate, we finally find the dragon from earlier, but hang on, why? He doesn't belong to the drow, and if he nests here, then how the hell were they going to bring anything through the gate? No matter how you look at it, this is a massive plot hole that will not be filled. build. Now, on a mechanical level, I both love and hate this fight. He flies around the room and spits an ice breath attack, so you need to dodge the balls of ice coming at you in addition to falling boulders from the ceiling. If you get too close and he flies off, his wings will deal solid damage to you, so stay back and shoot arrows or spells. However, the zoom limits make it annoying to see just where he's attacking from, and the falling rocks don't have any indicators of where they'll land on the ground, like shadows, despite the fact that the game can render shadows quite effectively. After some back and forth, Cyraxes breathes his last and we level up, whereupon I unlock the most broken spell in the game, Ball Lightning. On to Act 3, and this spell will carry me for the rest of the playthrough. At level 1, Ball Lightning supposedly does 36 damage per second, but if you started at a distance from the target, it can very easily do more than that to multiple enemies all at once, making it absolutely broken, especially at higher levels. The undead and the lizard people in Act 3 function the same as every other enemy type we've met, with no new mechanics to speak of. Once again, top-notch environmental designs, murky brown water, fallen trees, very sparse and swampy. At the end of the map, find Slavos, a friendly lizard man who says that the others have been charmed by an onyx tower that rose up out of the middle of nowhere to help the owner build weapons of war. So he raised a magical wall of vines to block them out. He wants us to find Secessith, their king, and kill him. Till then, he serves as our shop, once again breaking immersion by telling us that he has no need for human weapons, but for some reason has a need for human gold. Not that I'll need anything because Ball Lightning is broken. Find Secessith at the end of the path, also voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, and his attacks can't be blocked. Oh no, whatever shall I do? Maybe the same game of Ring Around the Rosie I've been doing since Act 1. Head into the Onyx Tower, but before that, these dinosaur things that pop out of the mud are the worst enemy in the game. They deal constant damage if you touch them, and yes, they move faster than you do. They have massive health pools and don't stagger easily, which is worse when I run into their mother, who is enormous. I am not being insulting to their mother. Look at your screen. Once you're past the dinos, head inside this tree, and the design team shows off their incredible chops once again with the magical crystal decor. Then I run into these minotaurs, who are the first enemy to have their own unique attack. They'll charge you and stagger you momentarily. Slavos is at the center of this tree and says the portal, this huge column of swirling particle effects, will take us through the plane of water to the Onyx Tower. So in we go, and the themes of the Onyx Tower are much darker. The floors are filled with automatons and stone gargoyles, which all drop very high-level weapons and armor, which is in line with the story of using this tower to make weapons for her army. At the same time, this makes me upset because all of the money I spent up to this point feels wasted because I am replacing all of my gear left and right. And as if to perfectly reflect that all of my previous efforts were a complete waste, killing this giant robot drops the Onyx Blade, the absolute best weapon for everything, everywhere, all at once, and instantly forces every other melee weapon into obsolescence. On the top floor, you can walk through these fake walls, which is a mechanic that doesn't exist anywhere else in the game. Behind one of them, you can speak to Celadon, who finally reveals the identity of the woman at the top of the tower, but let's do a quick recap. This random man, who was not hinted at and did not exist behind a mechanic that is nowhere else in the game, sits here in lore dumps about this villainess who, up until this point, has had no real influence on any aspect of the plot. The only reason he is here is to provide last-minute backstory and tension in order to try and loosely connect the other events of the game to this very point. It's weak writing on part of the villain, the supporting cast, and us as the protagonist. The woman's name is Eldrith, and she hates Baldur's Gate, so she's amassing an army to destroy it. Not even the game pretended to care about giving her a story until this point, so I'm not going to start caring now. Ascend the tower and face Eldrith, who is a bundle of cliches so bad it somehow affects our lines too. When we finally decide to fight, our final line we get to choose as a character is, "Your reign of terror ends here." Any more time spent even attempting to talk about her as a character makes me a worse reviewer, and the fight is no better. But there is one thing. If you ignore Celadon's warning and try to fight her head on, she can kill you in a single melee hit. That leaves two solutions, the first of which is maintaining distance. At a distance, she will throw her weapon at you, which needs to be blocked, so we can't use our bow and need magic. However, this is the first boss I have encountered that is immune to ball lightning, probably specifically because the developers knew just how broken it is. Magic Missile works with reduced damage, but as her health gets lower, she starts to use magic lightning attacks that you need to move around or dodge. Or, and this may be an absolute shock, that was awful. After she dies, the tower crumbles, and the ending cutscene reveals that we've been dumped into a forest of Slendermen. Slavos was working for someone behind the scenes the entire time, and I don't care, because this is just sequel bait. Roll the goddamned credits. Sadly, the game isn't quite over, because beating the game unlocks Gauntlet Mode, which pulls you into a hallway where you play as Dritz and have to kill all the enemies in these rooms within a time limit. There's limited potions, one-shot traps, and a final golem boss, which, in an act of utter disrespect, drops the Onyx Blade at the very end after everything is already dead. Beating Gauntlet Mode then unlocks Extreme Difficulty, which is something you play once you've decided you hate yourself. Somehow, despite playing through this game, I'm not quite there yet, so now we can finally answer the question, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, is it the worst RPG ever? Among all the games I've played, I think Dark Alliance stands out as being the most lacking in identity. I never felt like my character was a part of the story, more like an odd insert. We're not from Baldur's Gate, where a random tourist who got mugged went to get our money back and got roped into a plot that has nothing to do with us, all for the sake of a generic save the world plot, with practically zero personal stakes or reasonable build-up to the conclusion of Act 3. I was invested in the plot to get payback on Karn, a named villain and our nemesis, to rescue Ethon, who offered us help in the Elsong Tavern. Even Xantum, who feels a little too big for what we set out for, feels like he actually matters. But the moment we're made to join the Harpers, which will never matter because no one cared to ask until after we've already solved their problem, we gallivant off to a completely unrelated location, abandoning the relationships we've built with those around us. Fight a semi-naked lady who we are told is so evil and bad we're totally justified in killing her. Then we fight and kill a dragon in his own home because he got in our way. Then we go to a random swamp, get roped into another plot about lizardmen you can just forget because it will literally never be mentioned anywhere else, and fight this crazy lady in a tower who hates Baldur's Gate for a reason no one could be bothered to actually explain until literally one step before the end of the game. And I don't care about last-minute exposition man Celadon. That is literally the laziest way to introduce a character's backstory. For a game called Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, our only time in the city mainly takes place in the sewers with zero relevance given to the actual city, and the only alliance seems to be in Act 1, with the main antagonists of Acts 1, 2, and 3 barely referencing one another. Karn is a villain with powerful motivations. He wants to take over the criminal underworld, even if he has to resort to allying himself with the evil Xantum. We see him ordering his thugs to kill us, kidnapping civilians, and sacrificing his own men to further his own goals. By contrast, the Dark Elf Lady appears out of nowhere, says a generic "I'm bad, please kill me" line, which we do only because the plot demands it. Then we go off to a swamp and fight this random lady in a tower presented as the historical antagonist to the city so we can be framed as the city's savior. Visually, they've taken the set dressing and appearance of the previously successful Baldur's Gate, the Elsong Tavern, the Harpers, and mechanically transformed it into a generic dungeon crawler fully equipped with underutilized janky mechanics. It's stolen valor used to push a story that isn't deep and isn't well written in a game that isn't particularly well designed. I've said before that writing and game design are difficult endeavors, but I don't believe they did the best with the tools given. The environmental design is gorgeous if somewhat limited by the forced combination of the isometric viewpoint, minimal zoom out, and level design choice to make most areas inside of a cave or underground. Combining multiple individual puzzle mechanics together with the use of vertical space at the end of Act 1 is fantastic and proves that they are capable of making an interesting, mechanically dense game, but in the end, chose not to. By Act 2, vertical movement is made entirely irrelevant in favor of more combat encounters, but the combat is full of jank and easy to cheese. The storytelling is clunky and doesn't give us a good reason to be involved in the main plot after Act 1, which is narratively the best part of the game. It's clear that the team behind it ran out of creative steam and motivation to keep making the game, but still decided they wanted 3 acts, even if it didn't serve to improve the pacing or the plot. If a mechanic, system, or narrative choice doesn't enhance the player experience, it shouldn't be there. And this game is 2 acts too long. Dark Alliance is bland and generic. It is simultaneously a terrible Baldur's Gate game and a worse than average Diablo game. It is a hack and slash like, Baldur's Gate like, Diablo-like, RPG-like that won't be remembered for anything special or original because it doesn't do anything special or original, and what it does hasn't aged well. So to end this review, I will award Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance a slightly moldy cheese sandwich out of 10. Thanks for watching. If you like these videos, please be sure to like and sub down below. It really goes a long way to help push my content and get more stuff out there. Be sure to check out the other channels as well as Miss Yoshi over on Twitch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.